up. That's kind of how laws of the universe in a certain way. It's when you release moksha. This is moksha at the bottom. Moksha is the Hindu word for letting go, for release. Moksha is what happens just before liberation from samsara, the wheel of life. This is the wheel of life you're looking at here too. Birth and rebirth and birth and rebirth and birth and rebirth and birth and rebirth. How the fuck do you get out of that? You've got to let go. That's moksha. And moksha is also nirvana. What does nirvana mean? To extinguish, the extinguishing. When the flame goes out, when the moon goes dark. What is the absolute seed of Buddhist enlightenment? Emptiness, sunyata. There are three faces to enlightenment in Buddhism: emptiness, sunyata, emptiness of self, anatman, and dependent co-arising. So saying that this is not a thing, there's no inherent value in this thing, there's nothing here, there's no thing. There's only an interdependence of interconnectivity. Break it all down, there's nothing there. So everything is empty, just an interdependence of everything. And you are empty. Even your Atman that you think of as this core, eternal, endless, unbreakable seed of self, even that is dependently co-arising perhaps over a long time scale. This is the core inside of the Buddha: emptiness, dependent co-arising, emptiness of self. This is represented metaphorically when the moon goes dark, right? This is when we empty ourselves. This is when Christ empties the cave and empties the tomb, or when Osiris empties the tomb. This emptying of self. And now this is something I really want to drive home. People fuck up the hero's journey. This is the single biggest abuse of the hero's journey. When you have your hero go through a journey and become a fucking superhero without submitting, without emptying. They keep that ego and they achieve success? What does that tell society? How is that conditioning our world? And then there's a mistake, a conflation of the hero's journey with something more like a hero complex. I'm the hero, I'm the good guy, I can save the world. That asshole is a good guy. It's a good guy. It's a good place to be. And we're all good for having that attitude. But a more advanced hero is not have that complex, that martyrdom, that need to be the guy that does it. There's a little bit of a root of narcissism and egoism, and it's not wrong. It will evolve, it will grow, it will lead you on the journey, but ultimately we have to overcome that narcissism, that egoism, that martyrdom, that desire to be the one. Just like Neo has to get over the idea that he's the one before he can be the one. So that is one of the biggest mistakes of the hero's journey, and it's led to serious slander because when something's the biggest theory in the world, one of the biggest theories in a world, it's going to be attacked in every direction. And this is one of the biggest attacks, and it's completely off base. It's completely wrong, but it's totally founded in the fact that so many filmmakers get this wrong, where they don't have their heroes actually deconstruct that ego before they complete the journey, before they get the elixir. So that's what should happen. If you look at the myths, not just at the movies, you look at the myths, that's what happens. They empty. And it's only when the Buddha's totally empty, that's when he has the spark of dependent co-arising. That's when enlightenment comes. That first enlightenment, the relightening. After nirvana, extinguishing, comes enlightenment, the first little bit of light. And now the return of light. So that's where we're going to go. So what happens here? This is when we're about to pull the plug on Morpheus. It's all about to go down. And then what does Neo do? Fuck it, I'll sacrifice myself. Stop. That's the first spark. It's in his self-sacrifice that we have that he expresses his emptiness, and that we begin Act 3. And we stop right in that moment, and we don't kill Morpheus, and we continue on. Okay, so that's where we are. That's where we've gotten to. And now we have this first spark, and now the rest of today's class is going to be about getting this first spark, getting that little crescent moon to grow into a glass half full. You see here, the moon is emptying. It's half empty. Here it's half full. You see the difference? The reason it's half empty is because it's emptying. The reason this is half full is because it is filling. The glass half full, glass half empty, there's also a directionality to it. So ask somebody, hey, is the glass half full? Is the glass half empty? You say, well, I don't know. Am I filling it or emptying it? Anyway, so here we are. So here's where we're refilling this light. The sun's going to come back. We're going to get to sunrise. We're going to get to the redemption of spring. So this is where we're going. This is where we're on. So the key steps here in the journey, or actually the overview of Act 3, is going to be the return itself, some kind of delivery of an elixir, some kind of catharsis. We'll talk about what catharsis means. A fancy French word called denouement, which means to disentangle. The knot finally comes untangled. And the execution of the plan. So also, when you get that first insight, this is beginning to be a plan, an idea of how to solve the problem. And eventually it's going to grow into a real plan that you're really going to execute. So then it's also, what you might also, another word that one of these guys uses is implementation, execution, very similar. And integration. This is, remember, we've separated from our former selves. We've initiated into a new self. Now we've got to reintegrate this new self into the world. As you go home, when you go home for Thanksgiving or Christmas, you're going to go home a new person, a changed person, and your parents are not going to see it right away, and it's going to drive you goddamn crazy. They're going to treat you like they treated you before you left. You're going to feel like you're not who you were when you left. There's going to be tension because of that disconnect. It happens like clockwork. This is the return threshold. When you get home for that first time, you have this challenge to be seen as this new transformed self. And this is the same with anybody going through a rite of passage, whether you're an Aborigine in Australia or doing your tobacco pipe ritual with a Native American doing a tobacco ritual, or if you're a Hushan College student that's coming home from your first semester. You will have the challenge of reintroduce, and the same thing will happen after every great chapter of your life. To reintroduce yourself to the world after X, after Y, after your big adventure, after the big transformation, after this particular part of your career, and so on. So those are the general qualities of Act 3, the main thing we're trying to accomplish. And the other thing that we really want to see in Act 3 is a real climax. A real climax. So one of the things we're going to talk about is how can you deliver that feeling of a climax? Okay. So there's our overview, and this ends Act 1 of Act 3.